Hey there. Alright, so this topic, I'm not trying to be controversial about this topic, but it might come off that way. But I just wanted to share my own perspective of something that I see out there. And I'll do it from two different angles. And one is, excuse me, I'd started hearing this thing about autistics, people who identify as autistic or have been diagnosed with autism, saying that they have this thing called, they do this masking. And what it means, what I've gathered, is it means that they've put on a mask in order to appear more acceptable or normal to society or the people they're dealing with, right? And, the first thoughts that I had were like, okay, they're just finding words and labels to describe the experience that they're having, which also happens to be the experience that every human is having. And so my question for that, for this topic in particular, is like, we talk about neurodivergent people. Like, well, who are these neurotypical people? Like, who are they? Where are they? Like, did you ever see one? Because, like, I can see people's soul purpose, their soul, like, that connection there, and I can see their shadow. And I haven't spent a lot of time looking at masks, just so you know. I've known they were there. I was wearing one myself. But, like, I can tell you, there's no neurotypical. There's no neurotypical. Who are these neurotypical people? What, you think there are people that are liking wearing their mask? Like, authentic people, those are the neurotypical people who all seem the same? No, nobody is the same. Everybody who's fitting in is wearing a mask. It's their vetting process for processing life. It's their first line of defense. It's their way of coping with life. It's everybody, that's a coping mechanism, and everybody is using it. Not everybody, I won't say that. People who are being authentic to themselves are not using it. And those people have never been labeled as neurotypical. Those people who don't fit in the box, kind of quirky, kind of strange, not trying to fit into social norms. Those people are probably on that scale of autism or whatever, if we were trying to label everybody with something. They're not neurotypical, they would be neurodivergent, right? But if everybody has that, like, can't we just say we're humans? Can't we just say we're humans and this is how we've all been operating? And gee, glad we know it. And let's let everybody drop their masks. F fitting in, okay? We're all a unique puzzle piece, and we all need to be most authentic as we can so that we can know where we fit in the puzzle. And another thing, okay, so, if I have offended you by saying this, it's because you may feel invalidated by what I've said, because you really maybe were using those labels to feel validated. And I want you to know that's completely understandable and normal, and I just want you to know it is valid for you. What you're feeling and experiencing is valid, and it's completely understandable that you would want to use words and labels to identify that and work your way through that. So please continue on, maybe just keep what I said in the back of your mind if you wanted to consider it another time. You're doing good work by uncovering and getting to know yourself. And if the labels help you with that, great. There was a time for me where, sure, labels were helpful, but then I had to shed all labels, because a label isn't very useful when we're all unique, right? It's like, isn't a label making you neurotypical? It's like, look at it how you want. I'm just inviting us to see from this bigger picture view that if you watched all my videos, you would see that I've been talking to everybody as if they operate in that way with the mask and the, it's like, this is how I see humans working. We're all so beautiful, great that we're going to be taking off these masks and letting ourselves be authentic and letting ourselves make mistakes and shaking off the debris and the leftover shadow that came from corporal punishment and reward and scarcity and lack mindset and just like this bully kind of shaming and blaming way of being on earth. It's just, we're over it, right? Like, is there anyone who really is invested in wanting to perpetuate war-like tactics for living on earth? And wouldn't it be nice if we could stop all this nonsense and then just actually relate to each other, meaning like know ourselves enough to actually be authentic with ourselves and confident in ourselves and have the space that would allow us to want to know somebody else as well, who was being their authentic self and who we didn't have assumptions about because we weren't labeling them. That's just my thoughts and my ideas and my view on that. And the other topic that I have thoughts on was, I've now also been exposed to a trend, I think it was on Instagram that I started to see it, where mothers, might have been in a show or I think it was a Bluey, the cartoon Bluey, which I have only watched that once and I just do not like that cartoon. Honestly, if kids learn by example, no. Anyway, I've only watched one episode. It was, the father was trying to fix some plumbing by banging on some pipes. It was just dumb to me. But one person referenced that Bluey's mom was claiming she was overstimulated, right? And maybe she was losing her temper a little bit. And so also I saw a post of somebody on Instagram, I think it was Instagram, maybe TikTok, but they were saying that they were overstimulated and they were finally feeling validated that that was like a thing that we could recognize that happens to mothers. And, again, I want to say, like, yay for people finding words to describe what they're experiencing. And I also want to say that, like, being overstimulated or overwhelmed is a human state. Not just moms, but anybody can feel that, right? And this happens when we have a lot of our energy tied up in coping mechanisms and patterns and pains that we haven't fully processed through and understood to release ourselves from. And there's like this backlog in our energy of all those boo-boos that are still not processed, that we're still not like free from. It's like when you are not able to be present, right? When your whole life is about reacting, then you know that you're in that state. You have a backlog of stuff. Because when you can come back to presence, like in this case of where we're looking at mothers who are overstimulated, when they are in present with their child, with what's going on in that moment, they're not going to be overstimulated. The reason that they feel overstimulated is because there's stuff going on in their energy, in their coping mechanisms, it's probably could be repeating in their mind or their feelings that haven't been dealt with yet. So they're getting overwhelmed, right? There's too much on them to like kind of like focus on being present with their child in that moment. So what these mothers need is some support and some space to do that. But like also they would need to know that that's what they need to do, that they need to just kind of be with themselves and process. And this idea of like going to wine, like having wine, that's a way to kind of avoid doing it, right? Like, and even marijuana could be an avoidance, but I would think that cannabis could actually help in some instances if it wasn't being used like as an escape, but it was used as a way to kind of process things in a rate at which you could handle it, Once it's an escape, once wine's an escape, or once any drug is an escape, and I wouldn't even want to think about using anything else. And I don't use any of those things anymore. I got clear enough in my energy where all that backlog was cleaned up, and now I'm like able to be present enough to like notice in my operating system when I'm being brought to the awareness that there's something that I haven't understood yet or dealt with yet. Okay. And so the reason I know that it kind of functions like a backlog that overwhelms you is because that's what I went through, and that's what I did. I sorted out my baggage, right? And I took many years to do this, and I wouldn't, if I was in motherhood actively with like 3 kids, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I wouldn't have had the time to do it, because I would be, it's demanding to be a mother. You're the one caring for the child, the household, not only your needs, but theirs too. And so a lot of your time and space is used up. So when we look at like support for a mother, it's so important, like she needs some time to herself to be able to work with what's been done before, right? Like especially here, she's come into motherhood, she had a whole childhood. If she didn't know that she was going to have to deal with her childhood when she became a mother, now she knows, because now it's coming up, it's piling up, it's overwhelming her, and then she might interpret that as being overstimulated, because your nervous system is being stimulated with the thing. It's like this old thing from your own childhood is trying to get your attention as you're in that moment, and it's being activated, kind of like a PTSD trigger, where it's like this moment with your own child is activating you to this, and this energy is coming up to say, ooh, look at this, remember this? Here you are in a moment where you could kind of work through this if you had the presence of mind, which if you're overwhelmed with many of those things trying to get your attention that you've been ignoring, that you've been, either medicating away or, and I'm not saying that medication isn't helpful in when it's needed and prescribed by a doctor and taken appropriately. I'm not saying that because but it doesn't solve the issue. The issue still has to be worked through with presence and love, validation and acceptance for self, and whatever that is, whatever experience we had and whatever coping mechanism we developed in order to either deal with that experience or avoid ever having to deal with that experience again, will have to be identified, validated, accepted, love for self through it, and then it can be dissipated. Then you've kind of opened up the energy and created balance for yourself on it, so that it's not pressing you. Like the universe wants you to resolve these things, so your immune system, your energy is holding on to them, holding space for you to get to the point where you can look at them. And we're not taught that in our culture, right? Like religion, doesn't really teach people that that's what we're doing, as far as I know. Just so you know, I haven't studied a lot of religions very deeply, but in spirituality, this is what we're doing. We're paying attention to these things, and that's how I see it. That's what I understand about this idea of saying that you're overstimulated as a mother. Even when it's anger that's coming out of you, like the anger is probably rooted there and tied to the moment you're in being reactivated from a previous moment in childhood. Maybe mom was feeling overstimulated too, right? Like, and it could be many other things, and I can't cover them all on that one example, but like, I'm just trying to use that example as the gist of how it works, right? There are many, we can trace them back. You can get somebody who's good at doing that and seeing that, So these are just offered as a bigger, I'll say another perspective, because I don't want to offend anyone by saying a bigger picture view, but I do believe that our awareness expands as we clear out the backlog, like as I cleared out all the stuff that I still hadn't dealt with from my own childhood, I saw a bigger awareness. So what I'm saying is like I can now look back at everything I did and how it happened and what I went through, and look and see it from that perspective, like a bigger picture view. Hindsight, you could call it, retrospect, whatever. But that's how I see things. So may all the mothers who are now coming to the point where they do find themselves in this state and need support, may they have the support. And if you know a mother that needs support, please support them. And this is important because these things are passed along to our next generation. And so a mother who is overstimulated is likely not present and not she's very likely to pass along the program, the backlog to the child through her unconsciousness, through her overstimulation, through her reactive state, because that's how it works. You know, these are passed along things until we take the time to be present with them in ourselves. And that's why being present with our child through, you know, what they're going through assures that we're not passing it along to them. So we want to break these cycles for our future generations, and that's why it's important to support mothers and support ourselves where we can. And you know, if there is no support around, get strategic, get structured in a way where you can allow yourself this time, and you can also be present for your child when you're with them. You know, we don't want like television or TV shows raising our children, but like if that's the only way that you're going to get some time to yourself to deal with your backlog, you're going to have to take a chunk of time every day or something. You know what I mean? You just got to get creative. And know that you can. If you have a growth mindset and know that you can, then that's going to help a lot. And the problem with that might be only that a lot of the backlog, and it clouds our view and makes us feel helpless and victimized and overwhelmed in the moment. And it's hard to find solutions or line up with solutions or even think that there is a solution in those moments. So please know there are solutions. You can line up with them. You have to be open to that idea as a premise of how you operate in life. So my warmest regards and best wishes for anyone out there going through things that are difficult and trying to find answers about themselves and unlock, you know, bigger understandings and what I think the act of looking for labels and labeling ourselves is it's like validating ourselves, right? So I also want to add that, you know, whatever you're going through, however you feel, it is valid. It's absolutely valid. Just because there eventually might be a bigger picture view doesn't mean that what you're in right now isn't valid. What you're in right now, how you feel, the perspective you're in, all of it is very, very valid. You don't need anyone outside of you to tell you that. It is important for you to tell yourself that. It is a direct reflection of who you are, the energy and perspective that you have within an experience that you had. No one else outside of you had it from that angle and knows exactly all the things that you noticed or you experienced or you felt in those moments, or how you interpreted it, or the stories that you told, or the pressures you were under, or the impressions that were given to you, or the boxes that you were kind of forced into. You know that, so you are the one who has to validate it for yourself. And in a way, it's kind of like reparenting ourselves, right? And so acknowledging it, great. Validating it, go to self for validating it, right? This is the example we want to give to our children. We want to empower them to be able to validate themselves, to be aware, to be self-aware, but to also validate themselves. And so we do this by being an example of someone who does that. So our kids get to see us in the process of just self-care, which is acknowledging, validating, accepting that this is where we're at, right? Like we can't be in denial. We can't suppress it, deny it. A lot of these things were brushed under the carpets from our own childhood because of the generations before us, or the way that they coped, and their masks that they had on forced them to brush things under the carpet. Well, we're ripping up all the carpets. So we're pulling up the carpet and we're accepting what's there, whatever it is, however uncomfortable, however scary, however unprepared we feel for dealing with what's next. We promise ourselves that we're not going to hurt ourselves or anyone else before we go through these processes. Okay? There is a way out. There is another side. There is, you go through to get out and beyond it, but like you have to make sure that you're promising that you're not going to harm yourself or another in this process. So once you've accepted that it's there, then there's a part of you that feels something about it. And I know this because it's going to be anchored in there on the emotional body at some level. So however you interpreted what you were feeling, that feeling needs your love. Like you have to love the part of you that felt that. And as you are present, giving the presence, letting that feeling be with you, like welcome it into the bigger part of who you are and the version of you who's lived through everything you've lived through to this point. You've lived through it. You've done this. And as you are present with those emotions, what you find is that they dissipate. They don't have a big charge anymore, and they're not pushing on you as a stimulation to try to get your attention anymore, because you've given them presence. Now you're the one that can be present with that emotion, and it knows it, right? And so you give it as much presence as it needs, and you don't do this for the purpose of making it go away. If you do this for the purpose of making it go away, it's not going to work. Like, this is true presence and true self-care. This is true self-love. Now, over time of doing this, if you've had anxiety and things like that, those are all things that will dissipate the more and more you do this, because you earn back your own trust that you're going to be the one to caretake whatever you're going through. It's just a beautiful process of unfolding and dealing with whatever it is that you've experienced and that hasn't been fully processed and understood yet. Now, there's going to be some beliefs, right, in there that are not true. And so it helps to be able to question your beliefs, what you've been told. I think this. Why do I think that? Is that always true? Can I find evidence that it's not true? You know, what are 3 ways the opposite is also true? And any belief can be questioned in this manner. Absolutely any belief. You can loosen your grip on the stronghold you might have yourself in, which is literally just the imprints and the boxes that what you felt society was putting you in, as far as expectations and attached to outcomes, right? These are all things that could be let go of. You're going to feel a lot better. And then you return to living in the moment without those restrictions, and now you're free, creative being who is present. I mean, this is what our children need, right? Like, here is where all the solutions come from. That presence, that space that's not in any box, that's not being controlled by a belief or an expectation, that doesn't need to perform or be something that it's not, that just is, and is complete in its isness. So these topics, the purpose of me talking about these topics is just to invite anyone who it serves to be, free, if it serves them, to use this perspective to expand or compare or contrast in whatever way. I just put it out there as my perspective that I wanted to share. I honor you in your process. I know that you know best for you. So only take what is helpful to you. Thank you. Thank you for doing the good work. Thank you for being curious enough to listen.